Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Simone and I'm really excited to be on the online prosperity show with Prosper. And we are going to be talking about brain hacks, 188 shortcuts that our brain takes, and how to live a life of freedom, alignment, and happiness and clarity with yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm your host, Prosper Taroving, and today we have an episode that promises to be not just informative, but downright inspiring. Get ready to meet Dr. Simone Boer, the brain hacks queen herself, joining us on the Online Prosperity Show. And we're about to dive into the depths of neuroscience, career transitions, and personal empowerment. And I think this is going to have a bit of humor, because I think the subjects that we're touching on is a very sensitive subject, but it's going to come with a whole lot of expertise. And trust me, I think this episode is going to be one for the books. So buckle up and let's get started. Now, Simone, thank you so much for being, a guest on the Online Prosperity Show. Could you maybe start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you to become a neuro coach? And also, how do you actually work with people doing this?
Well, you've asked me three questions in one, so I'm going to have to make sure I get all three answered. Otherwise, you're going to have to prompt me there, Prosper.
Fantastic.
So I myself have always been 100% fascinated with the brain. Uh, and you think back to me as a child going, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because that's exactly what you can, everything is possible when you grow up. And so I went, I love the brain. I want to know how it works. Let's go down that pathway. And so that started a lifelong love and fascination with the brain, who we are, and what decisions the decisions that we make, how in control we are of those decisions. So I went down psychology because I thought that was the way to go. And when I finished my psychology degree, I felt that I didn't have enough worldwide experience or life experience. So I went down the neuroscience pathway. However, 6 weeks sitting in a windowless room by yourself, cutting up brain tissue, you get to think a lot about things. And went, this might not be the path that I've signed up for. So fast forward another probably 6 or 7 different career changes, from data analytics through to strategy, through to property investment and development, through to even managing and heading up pools and gyms and indoor sports centres in a region. I found myself in corporate life going, and that I think I'm done, came another little voice, which was my subconscious voice that said, what if you didn't have to work in corporate anymore? What would life look like? And I went, good question. It took me 3 weeks to muster up the courage. I knew what the right answer was, and I left corporate life and started out on my own, firstly as a coach, then realizing that I had a whole tool set that most other coaches don't have, and that was the neuroscience background. So I blended the two together.
So
And that's how I got to be a neuro coach. I've really fallen back in love with my neuroscience origins. I never left my neuroscience origins throughout my whole multi-career stages. I've never left the neuroscience origins. However, I've been able to blend my fascination with the brain with coaching and enable people to make unbelievable transformations in their life. Now, in terms of how people work with me, I ultimately use what you call brain hacks, which are little shortcuts. And those little shortcuts help cut through the shortcuts that the brain makes. And I should talk a little bit about the brain before we go too far in. So the brain is 2% body weight. However, it uses 20% of our energy. Now, it is a massive, 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 massive energy consumer, punches above its weight. However, due to it punching above its weight, it creates shortcuts in our life. And those 188 shortcuts that psychologists and neuroscientists have mapped helps us to see the life as we see it. So brain hacks ultimately cuts through these shortcuts and helps you to reframe and reposition yourself into a completely different new you, and therefore new life.
Interesting. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, Simone, the funny thing about all of this is so many girls just want to grow up to be a princess. Now, how did you sort of start seeing this whole brain and neuroscience to be a thing that could actually work for you? Was there any sort of motivation, that you saw, or something that was around you that triggered, you know what, I think this is the way to go?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, Prosper, because as children, we all want to grow up to be princesses or princes or firefighters or knights or anything like that. and all of that is possible as a child. But as we grow, we realize that none of that is possible. Or it could be if you're Mary Donaldson from Tasmania. And we start to close our box in of what's possible. Now, for myself, and it's very interesting you've asked that as a question, and I don't know if it's because you've studied me or not. However, I went down the science and the neuroscience pathway. And once again, it's really poignant that I said, when I was 14 or 15 years old, I was always fascinated with the brain and thought that I myself had free will of myself and the decisions that I made. And that meant for me going down the science, the neuroscience pathway. However, only 3 years ago, I realized that I had a mask, and that mask was so heavily ingrained into me and still is, and it is part of my identity. And that mask was so in place that I didn't even realize it was there. And I'd been carrying a mask my whole life. And it wasn't until a coach said to me, a mentor of mine, that said, "You have a mask on and you're not your real self." And I went, "You say that to me? I think I am. Like, I make my own free will of decisions. What do you mean by that?" And that comment took me on a journey of about 3 to 4 months as I started to unpick all components of my life and what this potential mask was. And there was always these little what would you call it? You'd call it like reminders or little things at the edges of my consciousness to say something not right, but it was something I never actually really took notice of. And so what I was able to unpick was that I had been carrying a very masculine mask my whole life. And that masculine mask occurred when the most neuronal activity occurs in the shaping of your brain and the architecture of your brain up until the age of 7 years old. And at the age of 6, I was therefore at that point in a full female household with a lot of feminine energy. So as a 6-year-old, what do? You try to balance that feminine energy with masculine energy. And that masculine energy therefore carried me throughout my whole life, going down the science and mathematics pathway, going down the very analytical pathway, going down the pathway whereby you get promoted into management, because a lot of management gets promoted from a masculine energy and the way that you behave. And so 3 years ago, I started to unpick that and realized, hang on a sec, this isn't the true me. And so therefore, whilst others are dreaming of being princesses, if you're a female, I was already in that masculine energy going, the science and mathematics is the way to go for me. And that was the mask that I was carrying this whole time.
Wow. Wow. And it took you up until the last sort of 3 years. So what was it like, you growing up around other people that would have taken on that whole, character of being a princess, and you're showing up with your white dust coat and maybe glasses already showcasing, who you were going to be amongst your peers?
Have you seen my school book? That's exactly what happened. My school yearbook was exactly like that. So I was incredibly serious throughout my whole life, and you couldn't crack a joke with me. I was very closed off in terms of my own personal self. I would never let myself be very vulnerable, and it was always eyes on the prize. What's the next thing to get? What's the next life goal, so-called societal life goal to achieve? I found, though, that there were all these tiny little reminders that that wasn't me. And at the age of 23, 24, one of what I considered my best mates at the time, he said to me, I know nothing about you. I've poured my whole life out to you and I know nothing about you. You're a closed book. I went, oh, that's an interesting thing. And then we go through our work career. And another really interesting instance was I had done the Myers-Briggs and showed up as an ISTJ, which is very much that masculine energy, very closed off, eye on the prize, just get it done, very, very analytical. And I had one of my colleagues say to me, that's not you. That is not you. How do we get on so well when that's not you? And I also went to one of my mentors and I said, so this is what I've shown up. And they also said, no, that's not you. And I started to go, who am I really with some people that we seem to have this beautiful energy bounce, and who am I with others that I'm very much that masculine energy? And when my daughter was born 6 years ago, I was still very in that masculine energy, but I had this tiny little thing in front of me and go, you're all mine. And that woke something up in me to go, there's something more to me than this. Let's get her fed. Let's change her nappy. Let's get her to sleep. And it was this beautiful, caring, nurturing side that I'd never tapped into for myself before. So not knowing that I had this mask on throughout my whole life, but there were tiny little clues left throughout the different components of my life that there was something more to me, that I was a much more whole person than what I was living, until you get the smack in the face, or ultimately that hack that cuts through the shortcuts that your brain has made to go, there's something more to you.
Fantastic. And I'm glad you heeded to that call, because one of the last questions that you had was, what if, I didn't like working in corporate? And you sort of listened to that because that message had just been, sort of coming through. But my question here is it just something that's peculiar to you, or is it something that a lot of people are going through, just simply because maybe you grew up in a household full of girls?
I think the whole world goes through this. And the reason for that is what we call conditioning. And it literally occurs from the moment we are born, we are conditioned. Now, humans only ever have one fear. However, we are conditioned to fear a lot of other things. And that occurs through all of our experiences, all of our observations as a child, whereby we have the most brain activity occurring in those formative years. And then I liken it to 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the track. We essentially have a 7-year-old driving the architecture of our brain and driving the decisions of us. And so I believe everyone has some form of conditioning. And even now, I've studied myself for many years. I am still pulling apart the bits of conditioning because we will always be triggered by things. We have lifelong memories ingrained in us that is stored within us. And even now, someone who knows all about conditioning, I'm still pulling apart those pieces of conditioning throughout all components of my life.
Wow. And I can only imagine, but I blame Hollywood for all of this on. All right. I mean, indulge me here for a bit because Hollywood presents this picture where you're born, you go to school, you go to high school, university, and you get married, you get a job, you get kids, and you adopt a dog, you buy a house, um, maybe get sick, and then you die, all in a space of 35 minutes plus commercials.
Yes, absolutely.
And so it just presents this next level, sort of activity, but you're actually growing by going back. Could you maybe walk us through what that now is doing? Because after the 3 years, you've started sort of going back and unraveling all of that. And yeah, just walk us through what that sort of looks like for you.
Absolutely. So once again, as I said, the brain has over 188 shortcuts. And those shortcuts help us to perceive and see the world right now. However, those shortcuts are also that the shortcuts help us to live our life where we are right now. And 95% of the decisions that we make are habit. And those habits get built once again in our formative years. So for myself, and I love to talk about my addiction to sugar, got built in the formative years. How does that happen? Well, back in the 80s, when you're growing up, yes, I'm starting to give you a bit of an example, understanding my age. In the 80s, when you grow up, you have the steak under the grill, which was quite popular in Australia. And then you have your ice cream dessert. And so the sugar that I have now, it reminds me all the way back to when I was a child, family time, sugar as dessert. And so it is all about unpicking all of your habits that you have now and just questioning them, going, where's that come from? Is that something that I want to continue or not? Now, I've simplified it way down, but I find having something really tangible, such as eating habits, all the food that we eat now is a byproduct of memories that we have stored as a child. So spaghetti bolognese often are people's often favorite because the family would cook spaghetti bolognese on a Saturday night. McDonald's is another one. As a child in a fairly low socioeconomic circumstance, the treat for our family was to go get McDonald's. And so it could easily be, let's go get McDonald's now. It's not something that I necessarily do a lot of now, but occasionally you go, oh, let's go get McDonald's.
Right. So obviously you're talking about, comfort foods and, anchors that put us in certain place and position within our lives. Because obviously, the time when you're young, you've got the protection of your parents, everything is all good, and certain foods and certain activities would actually start triggering all of those memories. Could you maybe say this is maybe how everybody's approaching life, just reliving their past and hoping it materializes in what they have right now, and eventually not trying to question any of it? It's always been like this type setup.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's where we get these groundhog loops that come into play as well. So I, for myself, have a groundhog loop. That is, I work myself to the bone and then I get sick. Now, we're not talking bad sickness, but there'll be some form of body shutdown. And that groundhog loop happens every couple of years. for me. And so what often happens with people is that whatever our brain survives, our brain will crave it again. So our brain will therefore seek out circumstances of what we survived and then seek to recreate those circumstances again, because it knows that it didn't kill us, but we survived it. And often people get stuck in these groundhog loops. It could be from a career perspective. I've heard of people who've been retrenched 5 times in their life. I'm like, that's incredibly unlucky, but there is a groundhog loop of circumstances for them that keep recreating that for them because they've survived each retrenchment. Then they go on to the next thing, and then they survive the next retrenchment, and then you will recreate those exact same circumstances. So be it the people who are yo-yo dieting, people who are in retrenchment, people who, from a relationship perspective or from a financial perspective, or all of these groundhog loops will occur throughout people's lives. So it's about taking a step back, going, do I have a groundhog loop? What's my groundhog loop that I may be stuck in? And what does that look like? And starting to pull apart, going, well, what are the triggers that lead to that groundhog loop? And what are the circumstances that regularly occur in that space? If it's, for example, from a career perspective, going, well, do I get scarred in the workplace? And do I carry workplace scars with me through each career that I have? What does that look like? And so it's about understanding the exact triggers for those groundhog loops, so you can start to understand that you've got a groundhog loop happening, and then to put in new habits, new changes in place. Now, what I'm talking about is quite some sophisticated stuff and can be quite difficult for someone to go out and go, but I'm hoping that these questions help people to go, is enough to stop people to go, what groundhog loop could I be living?
Like that, because I mean, obviously, this is people's lives we're talking about. So, all the advice and everything else is obviously of a general sort of nature. And, just coming back to your sort of experience in and of itself, I viscerally believe that fish do not see the water that they swim in, and neither can people see the air that they breathe in. So that's the reason why maybe these loops keep happening, and it feels like you are winning because you know what to do next, and it just puts you in a bit of sort of being in charge. But you say you've been doing these loops in and out, and you fall sick, and then your brain sort of overcomes them and things like that. But you've been in the game for about a decade now. So what keeps you passionate about what it is that you do, and day in and day out, without you losing steam? Because after every 2 years, you're probably just going to have 3 or 4 days of you questioning your own existence.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it is the sustained thanks that I get from my clients. And that can come through a testimonial. It can come through a voice message on the phone. It can come through a single coaching session where you see literally the eyes grow big and go, oh, I had no idea. And then what you see at the next session, a completely different person. And so what sustains me is the transformation that I literally see before my eyes of the people undergoing amazing changes in their life. But not only that, it's when I catch up with them a year or 2 or 4 years down the track, and they go and they have created some amazing circumstances in their life. And so for me, that's exactly what really drives me and gives me the energy, vibrancy. And for me, it's all about, for myself, this is the purpose and the passion that I'm living each and every day. And when I get bored of it, which, who knows if that will happen or not, then I'll go, now it's time to try something else. But for me, it's absolutely the energy and the passion that drives me every day when I see the changes that occur around me. And interestingly, I'll even get that from my social media. People say, that that post hit me. And I'm like, oh, hello. And so for me, what really drives me is one of my core purposes, which is around helping people live their life in their own alignment, whatever that looks like to them, and therefore their own success, whatever that success looks like to them. Because I believe each and every person needs to wake up from their life, wake up from potentially the masks that they're carrying, any of the shortcuts that is constraining them or leading them to be not happy or fulfilled. And often we don't figure this out until we've got several of the life goals ticked off and we go, why aren't we happy? And so what drives and sustains me each and every day is helping those people to also create the life that sustains them and is in alignment with them each and every day.
Fantastic. I obviously really believe that if you're making somebody else's life better, that also gives fulfillment. So in a way, you literally are giving people back to themselves because you're just literally helping them see things in a whole different light and maybe providing them with somewhat of a pattern break. Because if they just keep going in the way that they've been going, they won't be able to see that loop you're talking about. But if you put a spanner in the works, then they'll be like, wait a minute, something is not happening. And then they wake up from the sleep, as you eloquently said, so to speak. Maybe you can comment a little bit on that particular aspect of you giving people back to themselves, because it's just making them just really realize who they've been all along, but giving them the tools to make that happen.
You've just encapsulated my whole work there. It's literally that pattern break. And often people go, when that pattern break occurs, they go, but I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I'm even good at. And it's because they've never asked themselves these questions. And so the work that I do with people is I will ask them questions, or we'll play little activities or games that will circumnavigate their conscious mind, which is in their mind all of the chatter, which will quieten that mind, and it'll bring out their unconscious self, which is their true self, their self that they can't hide away from. Much like that subconscious and unconscious voice that said to me in that corporate life, going, what if you didn't work in corporate? What if you didn't have to work full time? Which is that sneaky little voice. It's a little bit playful, a little bit fun. It's a scary voice too, because it means that you have to face yourself and you have to answer yourself. And I believe a lot of illness manifests when we don't live in alignment with our true self. So the pattern breaks and the tools and the activities that I work with enable people to really have that inner voice out. But it's not only have the inner voice out, it's to have the confidence in themselves. Because often people come to me without the confidence in themselves. They're looking for the confidence of others to put upon themselves. And so this is about building confidence in themselves, that they have all the tools that they need in order to live a life that is true to themselves.
Fantastic, because you keep referring to this little voice and it gets a bit louder when you ignore it. But you got to train yourself to listen to it, because you took action on it when, it asked you, what if you didn't like to work in corporate? And some people might just think, I've got bills, how is that gonna sort of happen? So do you reckon when you know that voice is very loud, but you keep doing things that are not say essential or relevant, would that be what then creates imposter syndrome?
Oh, 100%. That is exactly what creates imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome occurs often for our need for connection over our need for being authentic to ourselves. So we are therefore end up putting ourselves into situations whereby we are not being authentic to ourselves. And therefore, when we're not authentic to ourselves, we don't know what grounding we live from, and therefore that voice that we can portray for ourselves.
Now, Simone, indulge me if you can. You see, one of the things that you asked me was where am I based? And I said, oh, I'm in the most livable city in the world, right? And we started joking about, oh, if you scream, I can hear you because we're that close together geographically. But I was born in Zimbabwe in Africa. So in essence, I had to travel to come to Australia, which puts me completely out of my depth, out of my comfort zone, and everything else that comes along with it. So many people haven't had maybe an opportunity to even go outside their postcode, what they've always known, what they've always had, what they've always been. And you also mentioned that up until 3 years ago, you were still acting in the way that society had imparted on you. Yes, your family is also sort of part of a society. So what maybe do you then suggest are the things that could help people to get out of this sort of humdrum, see that sort of pattern break, and just really start taking care and maybe finding their passion and actually catalyze change to live an abundant life, which is some of the things that you help people achieve?
Yeah. So the first thing is to sit down with a piece of paper, write out the numbers 1 to 50. And with that, write all the things that you love to do. Now, say 50 because a lot of people cannot get to 20 or 30. And then when you get to 30, something magic happens. And that magic thing is you start to remember all the things that you loved as a child and all the things that you'd forgotten to love that you loved. So that's exercise number 1. Exercise number 2 is essentially the same thing, except you write a list of 1 to 100. And this becomes your bucket list. Write down all of the things you want to do before you die. Now, it can be really simple things like for myself, for my children, and I have a 20-month-old and a 6-year-old, show them that they are loved each and every day. I want to make sure I do that before I die. So it can be things, really simple things like that, which is really living in the incredible present moment. And it can also be way out there things. And so it can be things like visit Antarctica and do a swim in Antarctic waters. Now, for me to get myself into a position whereby I could do that, I realized that that might not happen for maybe 10 years for me, and that's fine. But there are certain things on that list that I can certainly put into place this current year while I build myself to do something like that for my life circumstances in about 10 years' time. And so this idea of being able to break out of where you're at, 2 lists, really simple. 1 of things that you love to do. And the reason why I get that list happening is that you'll often remember things that you want to do. An example is I love doing 1-day learning activities with my sister. And once I remembered that, off I went to do a cheese making afternoon with my sister.
Okay.
And then having that with the bucket list so that you can tackle 4 or 5 things, or 6 or 7 or 10 things in that bucket list over the next 12 months. 12 months' time, you come back, you look at that again, you pick another 5, 6, 7, or 8 things on there and tackle that. And that helps you to grow, it helps you to challenge yourself, it helps you to put yourself out of your comfort zone. And you never know, you might just find something that you really enjoy. An example is one of my clients who wanted to learn to do a helicopter ride, but not only that, to actually learn how to drive it. So he did an afternoon of it, as well as a plane, a light, two engine plane. And he said, I loved the helicopter. I've now got that on my list to get my pilot's license for a helicopter in maybe 5, 6, 7 years' time. Life circumstances isn't quite right for me now, but in 5, 6, 7 years' time. That one act, I saw light in his eyes, life in him, and he's sitting there going, the exhilaration I got from driving a helicopter, and I'm like, this could end up being a new career a couple of years down the track.
As soon as he did that one afternoon, riding a plane, riding a helicopter, he's made that decision that in 5 to 7 years' time, he would love to have a helicopter's license. And who knows, that could be his next career. So it is about doing the work for yourself. And the work that I've just said is pretty simple, a couple of simple activities that starts to do that pattern interrupt, but also going ahead and making some changes to your life from doing that work.
I love that, because so many people, like you say, have that groundhog loop. And if you start projecting things that you want to do before you die, it really takes you out of thinking, oh, I just got to pay these bills, to, oh, wow, I got to buy a helicopter, and your brain becomes an idea or a heat-seeking missile to find ways, people, circumstances, and opportunities to bring you towards actually achieving that in particular, as a result. Now, Simone, obviously, people are just wondering right now and sitting at the edge of their seats thinking, how do I get all this information? Or how does this work? I heard while you did mention I was studying you. You've got a masterclass that you regularly offer. Could you just maybe give us a glimpse of what the attendees can expect from it, and how they can actually subscribe or join the next one coming?
Yeah, absolutely. So I run regular masterclasses, and they do have different intents. And the one regular one that I run is around how to create unstoppable confidence so that you can achieve everything you want in your life. And so that's a real confidence-focused masterclass, whereby we cover what is confidence, how do you get confident? How does everyone around you appear confident? And maybe you're not. And some hacks in order to create confidence. I also have a masterclass around creating your own life vision, of which I've given you 2 little mini examples around creating your own life vision as well. And that gets run on the alternative months to the how to create unstoppable confidence to create the life that you want. So in order for people to get in touch with me, they're welcome to send me an email of info@freshapproach.com.au. They're also welcome to get in touch with me through social media, and you just look up Dr. Simone Boer and you'll find me through my social media, and sign up to the next masterclass that I have running, which will be early March.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that all those details and links are in the show notes, just so that people can actually get a straight line to Dr. Simone herself in order to get this. Now, I mean, obviously, this has all been an exciting journey, and peering into your life and things of that nature. But you you brought us back to the time when you were 7 years old and you decided, you know what, this is going to be my life and things of that nature. And yet 3 years after, you realized you were operating in a whole different, you know, fraction or in a whole different way than you were supposed to. Now, knowing what you know now and all the hacks that you now have and the experience and, life that you have lived, if you would have been 7 and watching this video of your future self, what sort of advice would you want to give that 7-year-old who thought, you know what, I'm going to go in this direction and this is who I'm going to be and nobody tell me nothing?
I would tell that 7-year-old, firstly, she is loved. And I think we, at that age, we create a lot of beliefs that are so deeply seated that I didn't realize that was a belief that I carried throughout my whole life. So I'd sit down at that 7-year-old and I'd say, you are loved. And also the second thing I would say is trust yourself. Trust the life path that you are on and trust yourself. So I've had to go through all of this stuff to be experienced in the way that I am, to be my unique self, to be my funny, unique self. And to just sit there and tell that 7-year-old that you are loved and trust the path and trust yourself that you're on, I think would make a world of difference, but wouldn't shift the path too much from where I've been as well.
Oh, absolutely. Now, something remarkable is going to happen next year, Simone. Your daughter is turning 7.
She is.
All right. And she's going to be at that formidable age. Now,
Yes.
could you maybe let us know what you have sort of in store and what sort of path are you going to get her to believe of herself if she gets to be on a show like this later on in life?
Yeah. It will be literally that she is loved and to trust herself.
Absolutely.
Because I think that is the two most important things that a 7-year-old should know.
Fantastic. I think a lot of us, like you said, we're 7-year-olds that are just driving through life and nobody has come back to give us that hug and tell us that everything is okay. So we just keep going and going and going. And before we know it, we start formulating those habits and loops, which obviously are not serving us anymore. Now, you've
Absolutely.
given us a really cool tool, and I would want to see, where it stands with you as well. The 100 uh, checkpoint. I was about to say 100 points of ID, but
It can be because it is 100 points of achievements that you make through your life.
Absolutely. So this 100 points of things, could you maybe let us know, what people can expect from you in the future there, Simone, now that we've known where you've been, where you're at right now, and what's next?
Yeah. So what you'll expect from me in the future, you're going to get a few books written all around brain hacks. So that is literally on my list to do is to write and publish some books, write and publish a planner, a life planner for people, to write and publish a vision board kit. So those are from the business perspective, what I want to be moving my business into. There is a lot of travel coming up for me and some more foraying into property investment. So I've set myself as steep tasks from the property perspective around commercial property, learning how to do commercial uplifts and flips, because that's going to challenge me incredibly this year, and to rework my property portfolio over the next year for today's age.
Oh, fantastic. That is going to be a lot of learning and cutting of patterns, because not only will you be going into a shop or a building without looking at its bones and thinking, there's potential in here. What could I do with this piece of property? And it engages you instead of just meandering through like what everybody else does right there. Wow, that is fascinating. Now, you know what that means when you're going to write books and you declare that you're going to write books, especially on a show like this. That means you're going to have to come back and launch them.
It certainly does. I do realize that now. Now that I've put it out into the ether, I have to now do it.
And you actually have to come back and launch them on the Online Prosperity Show. So we're going to be waiting for that.
I'd love to jump back on, and I'll love to launch the books and say, here's what I've written.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the time and the energy that you brought to the show today. Like, for real, if I've been looking at your stuff and just having a glimpse into your life and who you've become was a masterclass in and of itself. So I really appreciate you taking the time there, Dr. Simone.
Thank you, Prosper, and thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Absolutely. And there you have it, folks. What an incredible journey we've embarked on with Dr. Simone Boer herself, the brain hacks queen. Now, if you found this episode fascinating as I did, trust me, you would have. Otherwise, you're just going in your constant loops. We need to break that pattern. So be sure to catch it again and share it with a friend or two, somebody who's just going around in circles and chasing their tail. And it's not their fault. They haven't met Dr. Simone yet. All right. So you should definitely subscribe to the channel because you never know what the next insightful conversation could bear. And I'm going to put all the links for you to connect with Dr. Simone in the show notes below. But until next time, keep prospering, keep learning, and keep being the amazing individuals that you are. But be sure to break those patterns, break those loops, because there's apparently, how many, Dr. Simone?
188
shortcuts. And if you just take one each and every day, that could take you throughout half of the whole year just to get past them. So you see, there's a lot of work to be done. So see you on the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe and just be true to yourself. Bye for now.